salatu wa salam ala rasulihil kareem ala sahbihi ajma'in. My dear brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum. Welcome to tonight's webinar. Allah bless you all for taking your time out tonight. Tonight is part of an emergency campaign that is being run by the National Zakat Foundation, and we'll get more detail to the background of that. But the title of tonight's webinar is Bridging the Gap. It's a collective Muslim response to the financial emergency due to COVID-19. And tonight our guests are going to be Iqbal Naseem, CEO of National Zakat Foundation, and UK Director of Islamic Relief, Tufail Hussain, and of course yourself here live on Facebook tonight that can ask questions about the ongoing issue faced by the Muslim community around the country in the UK itself. Subhanallah, as we know that 2020 has been one of the most difficult years in our history, and it's unprecedented, very difficult for many of us in different ways. We've been affected, whether financially, whether from a job perspective, whether a bleak future next year, every one of us, whether our health, sadly, whether we've lost loved ones, we're all been impacted in a very different way of the pandemic. So up and down the country, sadly, many Muslims have been falling short on a financial level, and the record numbers of applications that have been coming into somewhere like the National Zakat Foundation, which is, the only platform, subhanAllah, that is actually recording as to what's happening on the back of the pandemic and the impact. But obviously there are many organizations around the country trying to support people that are affected by the pandemic, just to cover basic costs and to survive. So NZF, National Zakat Foundation, the organization has seen firsthand what's actually been happening to fellow Muslims, with applications almost doubling. And I believe there was a period where an application was coming every 15 minutes. So that's 4 applications an hour compared to 1 application every hour. The need has been so great this year that the zakat pots, and there's 4 different funds that Iqbal would tell us about, are sadly starting to run out to meet the needs of Muslims up and down the country. And I believe January come February, the pot for the hardship fund, relief fund, which is the one that most people are applying for, most Muslims are applying for, is the one that's going to run out in a couple of months' time. So last week, National Zakat Foundation actually launched our Zakat is Running Out campaign, calling on the whole community and charities to work together to bridge the gap for our brothers and sisters who are affected because of the COVID. And generally, we have to understand that the financial impact of the COVID and the community and society we live in is not just in the last 9 months, it's been ongoing for many years, if not decades, and we've only started to take action recently. So a reminder that you can find out more about the campaign. You can go online and give zakat to nzf.org.uk, zakat / zakat is running out. Tonight, we're going to speak to Iqbal Naseem, the CEO of NZF, about the campaign and why it's important, and also Tufail Hussain, the Islamic Relief's UK Director, on the growing importance of zakat in the UK and why they've decided to collaborate with NZF to meet the record levels of need. So let's welcome Iqbal Naseem, the CEO of National Zakat Foundation. Iqbal, assalamu alaikum, and welcome to our stream tonight.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Jazakallah khair for joining us. Iqbal, look, just try and put 2020 into some kind of context. NZF is 10 years old next year. Where does it fit when you look at the last 9 years of activity of NZF trying to support Muslims in need in the UK, to try and showcase that there is a need here as well, that we need, we need to give zakat and support people locally?
Sure, inshallah, I'll try to do that. So, so as you said, this is we launched in 2011. 2020 is our next year is our 10-year anniversary, and so in this period, what we've seen in 2020 so far is the fact that the number of applications that we have received from those in need around the country has more than doubled compared to last year. And prior to this year, last year had been our busiest year in terms of demand and in terms of zakat distribution. That means that overall we expect by the end of the year to have distributed around £4 million of zakat across the UK, and that will have benefited close to 14,000 Muslims by the end in 2020.
I mean, the numbers that you talk about, it really is a drop in the ocean, is it not, of the number of Muslims that are probably affected, but only you can support with the funds that you have.
No, that's right. So, it is, you're right. It is a relatively small proportion, even of those who are out there who are probably in difficulty. Some of the work by our friends in Muslim Census, which is a recently started organization, indicates that the number of Muslims who have lost their jobs as a result of the pandemic and then the economic effects of that is somewhere in the region of around 15%. So that is a very significant number. And also, according to their findings, the rate at which Muslims have been suffering relative to others in this particular situation has been something at 10 times the rate, basically, of the rest of the population. Now, that's not necessarily to do with the fact of Muslim, non-Muslim. It's probably much more to do with the kind of the other aspects of the demographics of the kind of communities that make up the Muslim community in this country. But it is still
indicative. Look, we have the census. Sorry, we have the census obviously every decade, and some of these kind of figures do come out. But the Muslim census has taken a snapshot on the back of the pandemic. And you're just taking us through some of the findings, 10 times higher than the UK-wide estimation. 15% have lost their jobs as a result of the pandemic. And you're going to tell us about the furlough scheme, that Muslims that have been in a furlough scheme, that there's a greater likelihood of a Muslim losing their job on the furlough scheme than somebody else.
Well, I think, look, so more generally, the issue is that a lot of our brothers and sisters in our community are in the types of work or kind of contractual arrangements that are perhaps sometimes more vulnerable, to have been more vulnerable to the effects of the lockdown. So I think that's really at the heart of it. A lot of people are in the 0 hours contracts, kind of low paid kind of work, and a lot of kind of physical type of work and labor as well, which are a lot of which has then cut out as a result of the lockdowns that have taken place, and which are still in force in large parts of the country as well at a sort of very high, sort of the tier 3 level. So that's been the issue. The number of people, look, in our community, of course, just as there is still, some resistance to the idea of giving zakat locally within the UK, there is also resistance about the idea of people applying for zakat in the first place, even though it may be the right of those who are in difficulty. And it's not for those who have kind of lost their jobs. It's not the case that everybody ends up suffering desperately. People may have savings. They may then get onto. By the time they've utilized some of their savings, they may get onto a government support, or alternative sources of income may come through. So it isn't the case necessarily that everybody who has suffered as a result of the pandemic needs zakat. But the fact is, proportionally speaking, a large number of people, a huge number of Muslims do need zakat. More obviously, awareness of NZF is still growing, and it still needs to spread more to those people who are in difficulty. But the fact is, as I said earlier, the demand that we have seen has been at the highest ever level since we've started out. It's more than double what it was last year, and then we now find our situation. We now find ourselves in a situation for the first time since we began, that the supply and demand, if you like, of zakat, so the amount being given and the amount needed to meet the demands of those who are in difficulty, that for the first time they've come kind of out of balance, to the extent that we may be in a situation where for a period of time prior to Ramadan coming, which is when most of the zakat obviously comes in, that we may basically be in a situation where we have run out of zakat.
Well, look, I'm going to take you through some of the figures in a minute, but just a reminder to everybody who's tuned in online, if you can, please share the live stream with your circle online, to let them know that this is taking place tonight, to give an update of what's happening in the Muslim community in the UK and how people have been affected by the pandemic, and what National Zakat Foundation are doing, and also equally, if not more importantly tonight, what Islamic Relief as a collaborative charity have come forward to do. Now, look, let me just go through some of the figures, and I've got a question on the back of this for you, Iqbal. Muslims falling into poverty at a rate 10 times higher than the UK-wide estimation. 15% you've mentioned have lost their jobs as a result of the pandemic. 26% are placed on the furlough scheme. 27% of Muslim women have had to take additional caring responsibilities at home because of the pandemic that has affected their ability to obviously go to work. 57% of those who have lost their jobs also had extra caring responsibilities that impact on their ability to work. 42% of Muslims have used their savings to cover expenses due to the pandemic. And finally, another one of the strands that's come out on the back of the Muslim census is that 28% of Muslims have had to borrow money, either through family or friends or through formal means, to cover their expenses. Now, the question to you, Iqbal, is that there are many people who still think nobody in the UK needs zakat. They don't need any help. The welfare system can help them. How do you counter that argument?
Sure. So there's two things to say. Number one, that between the time that someone comes into a situation where they've lost their income and the time that they can get governmental help, obviously sometimes that's quite a long stretch, or period of time, depending on the information that they themselves become aware of, and just understanding how it is to apply for and access support. Number one. Number two, the process of obviously going through the forms and everything else. I know sometimes people think that maybe even the application form at NZF is perhaps too long or too difficult to fill out. That's always a constant balance for us, right, in terms of making sure that it's rigorous enough and easy enough at the same time. But governmental forms are a lot more complex and difficult sometimes to get through, and they cause a lot of they can cause a lot of stress, right? So anyway, the point is, once people have gone through that, and then obviously the system generally, as it has in large parts of the world, been overwhelmed with kind of applications, so it takes time for support to kick in. And it's also it's a misunderstanding that just because somebody is receiving benefits, that means somehow they're not eligible for zakat. Like, on what basis does someone become eligible for zakat? And more specifically, through our hardship relief fund, who do we support? We support individuals who we can assess to be in a situation where they're unlikely to be able to meet their basic needs within the next 1 month, within the next 4 weeks or so. So that's the assessment that we make, and we also make an assessment for that where they are in terms of what they have relative to the nisab, which is the threshold, above which we pay zakat and below which we can receive, which is around 250, 300 pounds. Okay, so the point is, all it takes for someone to be eligible to receive zakat by this definition is that they have less than 250 pounds to their name, number one, and number two, to qualify for our support through the hardship relief fund, that as looking at their projected income and expenditure and everything else, that it is reasonable to expect that they will struggle to meet their basic needs within the next month. Now, a lot of people come into those, will fulfill those definitions, right? A huge number of people will fulfill those. Will fulfill those definitions. So, that's simply it. It's not. You see, deciding who is and who isn't eligible for zakat is not an emotional. It's not an emotional thing. I look at someone, I just, or I see someone on the street, or I get to hear someone's story in some general terms, and then I can make a decision about that. No, it's a calculation, just as the payment and whether we should pay is a calculation. It's a system, it's a mechanism, and so whether or not we feel that people may or may not be eligible, the fact is they are, and the fact is, this is the point, not everybody who is eligible may necessarily apply. But those who do apply literally take the trouble to come forward, because an application, we can see it just as paperwork and bureaucracy. No, an application represents an appeal by a Muslim in our town, cities, in the streets around us, to say, I need your help. Yeah, it's not really, they're not asking NZF for NZF's help. They're asking the Muslims living in this country for help, for support. Yeah. And that's what that represents. And so when they do come forward, my argument simply is this: it doesn't really matter what we think or don't think about how many people are or are not eligible, generally speaking. But what does matter is when someone has come forward for support, they have been assessed. We can say with a confidence that this person is eligible to receive zakat. At that point, it's not a matter of choice. At that point, it's a matter of duty that we need to make sure this person's needs are met.
Well, look, just a reminder to everybody who's watching, Jazakallah for that, Iqbal, is that anybody who's watching just now, please do share the stream so that other people can get involved as well. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in, and our moderators will pass them over to myself. The first question that's coming, Iqbal, is there no way that you could have prevented the zakat from running out?
Okay, so it's interesting. So we have this discussion all the time, because obviously there's a kind of almost like a logistics job, right, in just dealing with the actual demand and the sort of distribution of funds and what have you. So the way you can do it is, the thing is, the only way you can do that is a kind of do it in an artificial way, which is by basically controlling the flow of applications. So if we control the number of applications that are coming through and control that flow, then we can say, well, because we know this is the amount of money that we have, say at the end of Ramadan, we can make a reasonable projection for what we're going to get. So we can say, okay, well, that only allows us to support so-and-so number of people. So then we should only receive the number of applications that's going to, help us to fulfill that number of people. But that's just artificially, stopping the zakat from running out. The reality is that, or as we have been doing it currently, is that we are currently working in such a way that as the demand comes through, we're trying to fulfill the demand. Yeah.
Well, look, talking about the demand then, let's go behind the scenes. When the pandemic started, I mean, obviously none of us could have envisaged that we'd be here where we are today. What was the initial thoughts when the lockdown started to take place at NZF? Did you think that you had to do something different? Or, did you start to see a sudden increase of applications that were coming through? Tell us what was happening in the background.
Well, the first thing we had to do is make sure that our home internet connections were good enough to work from home, and make sure that as a team we were like actually could function. And alhamdulillah, on that note, and it sounds like a small point, but obviously until that's in order, as an organization, you couldn't really function, right? So alhamdulillah, like that was actually quite a positive thing for us, because we actually started as a team working from home around a week or so prior to the actual lockdown being announced. So we kind of I wouldn't say we foresaw it precisely, but we were certainly trying to prepare for it earlier. And alhamdulillah, we had then therefore as a result like a relatively low kind of level of interruption to our service, because we were already geared up actually to work in a relatively remote fashion anyway. Obviously then at that point, over the course of March and April, we saw a quadrupling of the application numbers basically from what we had seen prior, or in the early part of the year, such that at peak level we were getting an application every 10-15 minutes, 24 hours a day, like around the clock basically. So every 10-15 minutes, a Muslim individual or a family was basically coming forward and saying, we need help, we're struggling, we're in difficulty. So it was a real challenge, right? But there was a sort of almost light at the end of the tunnel in the sense of the timing relative to Ramadan, because that enabled us at a time when Muslims are most generous and they give, and they tend to time their zakat anyway, to actually respond to that situation. We had a kind of 6-8 weeks of experience prior to that, in which we were dealing with the need, and then it gave us the basis to tell Muslims basically that look, the need really has gone up, it's really shot up, we need you to respond. And alhamdulillah, we had a record year of giving this year, but despite that record level of giving, of course, we have been in a situation where at the moment, I would say, look, overall it's been a good situation in the sense that 80-85%, if you like, of the need that we have seen, we've been able to fulfill with the funds that we have. There is still that gap. At the time, I know Tufail, our dear brother, has joined us. So, assalamu alaikum, Tufail. Islamic Relief were very proactive. Tufail himself was really proactive in April, so in the early phase, in making a contribution at that time. So I think it was by the end, if I'm not mistaken, I think by the end of April that we received a contribution of £150,000 at that time from Islamic Relief, from their sort of zakah funds. And that had all been distributed by July. So by 3 months later, it'd been distributed. So usually, that wouldn't be usually money in Ramadan. It takes some time before that actually goes. We do this in a kind of first in, first out basis, right? And so interestingly, what this means, by the way, just looking ahead, it also means that for the first time, that when Ramadan does come this year, so early mid-April, in 2021, that the people who give early on in Ramadan, their zakat is likely to go out within a week or two, probably, like very quickly. Because our balance will be very low. Typically we go into Ramadan with something of balance that's accumulated perhaps in the last few months prior. But since we're light at the edge right now, it will be literally a lot of people in the early phase of Ramadan, like the zakat will be going pretty much instantly out.
SubhanAllah. And look, just share with us some of the figures of zakat. Let's say for November, for example, or October. What kind of figures are you giving out at the moment on a monthly basis?
So it's averaged in the recent months. It's kind of been in the averaged around £400,000 a month, about £400,000 a month. So these have been kind of consistently high levels of distribution for the last few months. So in less than half a year, around £2 million of zakat has been processed, quote unquote, for want of a better word, right, and has gone out. And as I said, that has represented in that period around in the last few months then around 7,000-8,000 Muslims being having been supported. I know across over the course of the year, from beginning to end, once we finish, it'll probably be closer to the 15,000 mark.
Well, look, let's bring in Tufail, because I don't want him sitting there on his own. Assalamu alaikum, Tufail. Jazakallah khair for joining us.
I'm enjoying it.
You're enjoying it. Tufail Hussain is the UK Director of Islamic Relief. Welcome to the stream tonight, inshallah, about bridging the gap. Look, Tufail, before I come to you, Iqbal, just quickly tell us about some of the kind of cases that you support. I've got a couple of comments coming up on Facebook about 2 or 3 people that have got a scenario where they've struggled. But just let people know what kind of people you actually support, what kind of applications you get in.
Sure. Look, so there's a number of, we've definitely seen, especially in more recent months, we've seen a big, we've this year, just to give context. So, you know, in March, April, as I said, off the back of the lockdown, we got a huge influx of applications, and then it kind of plateaued, and then it started coming down a little bit in terms of the rate, although still it's a generally higher rate than we've typically seen. And then we had almost like our own sort of second wave, if you like, of applications, but this time with a heavy proportion of our asylum-seeking brothers and sisters around the country. You know, this is a segment of our community that I think we often really forget about, yeah. And you know, who a community that's already in you know, significant, is already, or just generally in difficulty and suffering. To be an asylum seeker in this country, by the way, the vast majority of asylum seekers in this country are Muslim, yeah. And so to be an asylum seeker in this country is already very tough, very stressful, yeah, very difficult. And the kind of support that is available, you know, is not really livable. Yeah, it's not really kind of workable support for most people. So, you know, that has been I just want to mention that, you know, that segment of our community has been a significant you know, sort of proportion of our applicants who are facing, you know, the same, and then if not worse, really of the same kinds of issues, which is just really basic, you know, just being able to meet their basic needs. That is what the Hardship Fund is about. You know, that part of NZF, which has been the bulk of the work that we've been doing this year, you know, is literally just pure relief work, basically, you know, and it literally means that you just have the visibility to afford, you know, to meet your kind of your basic requirements, right, of food and clothing and other and just basic things that you need just to live.
Look, before I go to Tafel, I mean, obviously, once people arrive in this country, they become asylum seekers. Another category of people, and I've got a message on our Facebook, is that obviously when you started out as an organization, it was a new Muslim that brought this issue to light, that there was a need. And we've got a similar point here about a revert Muslimah whose hunger, believe it or not, I mean, you know, Tafel can probably relate to this, being in the field, you know, around the world, and he sees these kind of things every day. But the hunger of this Muslimah is threatening her Imam, that she, you know, she's left her family to come to Islam, and there hasn't been anywhere to go to try and get food, that the Muslim community is not even coming forward. Yeah. So there's another category that you guys, you know, NZF has been supporting. On that note, I want to bring Tafel in. Tafel, because obviously before people come into this country, sadly there are many refugees, and that's what Islamic Relief has been known for over the years. And when you tell the stories of refugees and you're in Syria or Lebanon, wherever you might be, it's quite easy for people to relate to those stories, isn't it?
It is, and this is we've tried to. So since 2014, actually, Islamic Relief have been working in the UK. We did a very detailed scoping exercise to understand the need here in the UK at that time, and ever since then we have been working here. Over the last 2 years, we've distributed just under £2 million to support people here, people in need. And this one story really, you know, for me, just, you know, illustrates the desperate need here. We're working with this one organization in Bradford known as Give a Gift that helps refugees. And they shared a story about a young person that ended up committing suicide because of poverty. Because he couldn't afford to eat to make ends meet. Refugees are forced to survive on just £5 a day. A lot of them don't have homes to live in, so they do what's called sofa surfing. You know, wherever they can find a home at night. It's absolutely horrible situation. I went to one of these events with Give a Gift in Leeds actually, and they were so it was a soup kitchen, and it was the only day in the week that these families actually got to eat meat and a warm meal. And I tell you, if I tell you what I saw young families, you know, with children, with toddlers, that have basically been forced to walk around, and it was during the winter months, absolutely freezing, and they're walking around. And a lot of these guys, what it is, it's like, you know, when they need to find shelter, they have these locations where they can find shelter, but they very quickly fill up, especially during the winter months. So then they're forced to stay out on the streets, wherever they can find a place to stay, like in buses or whatever. Horrible, absolutely horrible situation. But poverty is very real here. You know, traditionally the community has always responded to poverty situations abroad, but I mean, for me, I started to realize the extent of the problem here in 2010 when I was told about a Muslim sister that was homeless. She was caught praying behind a bin in an alley. And when somebody approached her, they asked her, why are you praying here? She goes, I don't have a home. And what she was doing, this was Ramadan, she was going to the central masjid, London Central Masjid, having a shower there, praying Taraweeh, and then wandering the streets at night.
Allah.
And at that time in 2010, there was no National Zakat Foundation. And I approached both Islamic Relief and Muslim Aid to see if they could do anything to help her. And they couldn't. And that broke my heart. And I thought to myself, this is something, a need that needs to be addressed. And at that time, I actually got a few friends together. We just set up direct debits. We put her into a flat and paid for her rent and for her food. And then very quickly after that, National Zakat Foundation came about. And because of my experience with this sister, I've always had a very sort of close relationship with National Zakat Foundation. And I've referred many people who are in need to them, and they've always supported them. And so, when the opportunity came to partner together to do some work, it was a no-brainer for us. We very quickly, when pandemic hit, we very quickly understood that our community, which is the poorest community in the UK, 50% of our community live in deprivation. We very quickly understood that our community was going to be extremely vulnerable to the pandemic and to any lockdown. And so we immediately allocated £500,000 to support communities here in the UK. And one of the needs that we identified was need to get small cash grants quickly to family to provide relief. National Zakat Foundation has the best system set up, the most robust and the most accountable system set up to distribute those funds. So for us, it was a no-brainer to partner with them for this. And that £150,000 Zakat grant, we immediately passed over to them. And we were able to complement their efforts because alhamdulillah, Islamic Relief is, it has the largest reach of all the Muslim charities. And so we were able to use our marketing medium to really get across this message that there is this relief fund available. And alhamdulillah, I understood from Iqbal that at that time, through our joint marketing efforts, there was an increase in application. So we were able to support each other. And through that grant, 495 odd families were supported. I saw some of the case studies, absolutely inspiring. And so again, we knew that the second lockdown, the third wave, which is unfortunately just down the road, we knew again that the families were again going to. So we then decided to grant the National Zakat Foundation further £200,000.
Jazakallah khair for that. Tufel, if you're just tuned in, I've been watching for the last 30 odd minutes about bridging the gap and the need for zakat in the UK. Please do try and share the live stream. If you got a question, ask the question. If you want to make a donation yourself to try and ensure that Muslims in the UK don't go hungry or homeless, you can go to nzf.org.uk/zakat is running out. Tufel, on that note, mashallah, I mean, Iqbal mentioned £150,000 in Ramadan. And I believe that figure has been increased by another £200,000 on behalf of zakat givers at Islamic Relief that's gone to NZF. How do we balance this? And Jazakallah khair for that. I mean, I know that NZF are very grateful for that. You said that you've seen the case study yourself. You've seen the impact that it's made. How do we convince, many other charities, for example, and individuals? I mean, I asked Iqbal the same question, that there is a massive need in the UK itself, but for some reason that message doesn't seem to be getting through sometimes.
I think definitely through initiatives like this, where we're showing the public that we are two respected organizations coming together, utilizing each other's unique, so USPs or strengths to benefit the people that really matter, the people that we serve. And that highlight, I think that's one step in highlighting the need here. But I think there's other efforts that we can do. I mean, we see that international NGOs are increasingly doing more work in the UK, but the efforts are not strategic enough. And I think that we can do better to ensure that what we deliver is impactful, it is of a quality where we deliver dignity to the people that we serve. And so there are a number of platforms. For example, the Muslim Charities Forum. When the first lockdown was first announced, the Muslim Charities Forum as a platform came together and brought all the charities in the UK, well, the majority, but a large number of charities together to coordinate our response here in the UK. it was the first time it's ever been, well, it's second time after Grenfell that it's been done. There were some teething problems, but the fact that these charities actually came together and under one umbrella to do to try and do something together was, for me, quite inspiring. And it's only the beginning, inshallah. We see that, we have within most of our organizations, alhamdulillah, leaders that have good intentions, that don't just want to support people in need. So it's a case actually of getting the message across to those people to make them understand the actual need here, and not just the need, but our fard to help people here.
On the note of Grenfell, well, if I come back to you, I mean, obviously NZF ended up being, delivering on behalf or working with the charity. Tell us that experience of how the various Muslim charities came to forward on the back of Grenfell. What was that like?
Yeah, sure. So initially there was obviously different, lots of different responses, and our kind of core focus was the kind of cash grants, as Tufail referred to earlier. I mean, at that time it was literally cash grants, right? Because literally being delivered in envelopes sometimes, because they literally didn't have the access to the banking facilities, so they'd lost all their stuff. And then it kind of moved on to a more kind of structured thing called the Grenfell Muslim Response Unit, which was then co-funded by I think 4 different charities at the time, one of which was Islamic Relief, and kind of operated through NZF basically. So Grenfell Muslim Response Unit became almost like a special unit or a project within NZF. We administered the initiative and were supported by the funding from the different organizations for the operational costs of that. And then obviously, it allowed us to provide ongoing support, not beyond the financial. I think in that situation, we decided, look, NZF's core focus really is moving money, right, from the givers to the recipients, okay? In this particular case, we felt we need to go a bit beyond simply that, given the circumstances, and try and facilitate ongoing support, basically, to, counseling and other kinds of support that were relevant being affected. So alhamdulillah, it was a great sort of demonstration of collaboration amongst Muslim organizations, and I suppose allowing us to leverage or focus on what we're good at, what we're strong at. I have to say though, the other Tufail thinks I'm a negative chap sometimes when it comes to these things, but I have to say that I do find it a bit of a shame that it has to take a Grenfell or it has to take a coronavirus, for us to get our act together on these things. I don't understand that. I don't understand why we are just so reactive, as if there's no underlying principles to any of these things in the first place. I just think Islamic Relief and Tufail obviously has been one of the very few people and organizations, I think, to have, and it really comes down to the people, before it even comes to the brand, to have kind of understood this, to register it, to have first-hand experience as he has described, and I respect that a lot, because I appreciate that when people are in the kind of in various roles in different organizations, oftentimes we think through our brand hats and our organizational hats rather than just in terms of just the real situation, as just human beings and as believers and as either aspiring or existing sort of leaders in our community, whether we like it or not. We are in positions of leadership, and so all of that comes with a certain onus and a certain burden. And I think that people, in terms of your question earlier about how do we convince people to sort of to do more, individuals, institutions, what have you, we have to realize that as Tufail touched on there, and as I was trying to say earlier, that when however much you want to theorize about local zakah versus international zakah and all of these kinds of discussions that have come up over the years, and being fiercely and hotly debated at times, no one that I have ever come across, has ever really dared, to say that it is not our collective duty as Muslims living here to respond to the actual need that has actually come forward and registered itself with NZF, for example. That is not our collective duty to respond to that. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So in a situation like where we are right now, where basically there's this £500,000 gap that that we had or we could foresee, meaning that literally £500,000 worth of people in need who would need that support would literally be told you have to wait 2 months basically before we come and give in Ramadan, because that's when we want to do it. That is just not an acceptable situation. that is that is literally like, okay, that is literally like, I know so it feels like I'm in sort of Ramadan, last 2 nights of Ramadan mode. That is literally like, people, that number of people dying, yeah, and us failing to bury them. Yeah, no, we can't, we can't bury them. We can't come together. We just can't work it out. So let's just wait. Let's just wait 2 months until people, you can't wait. You don't do that. You bury the bodies, and so they talk about the duty to bury the body as a fard kifaya, meaning collective obligation, meaning everyone's guilty, right? Until this is done, this is sorted. We have a collective obligation. Muslim in need, in a community where zakat exists to give and the givers exist, every moment, I don't care, it's not about a day or week, every moment that person is unsupported, we are all collectively responsible. Yeah, there's no way around that. And especially leadership, especially people who have the ability to move money this way and that way. Because I've always said it doesn't matter what we do all around the world. And I commend all of that work, obviously, it's important work. But it doesn't matter what we do around the world. It's not going to excuse us for what we don't do for people who are right here, right now. There's just no way around.
Well, look, I'm going to come on to Tufel on some of the points you just made. But before I do that, just a reminder to anybody who's just tuned in or you've been watching for the last 30 odd minutes, please do share the link. And if you have got a question, number one, please do fire away on Facebook. Secondly, if you need to apply for zakat, you're one of those people affected because of COVID or generally, you can go on to nzf.org.uk and //apply. Or if you want to give zakat, you can do exactly the same. nzf.org.uk/give, or zakat is running out. The fact, I mean, look, subhanAllah, when the pandemic started, the response of Muslim charities and Muslim community organizations has been actually quite phenomenal. We really took the lead on what was happening on the ground within the UK, let alone what was happening abroad. I mean, we were at the forefront. How do we galvanize that, momentum to continue beyond? Because now look, the injection's out today. The first people received it. In a couple of months' time, we'll have forgotten COVID, inshallah, back to our normal lives. But we tend to start to forget what's happening on our doorstep. How do we galvanize the momentum on the back of Grenfell, on the back of COVID, that this situation in the UK is real and it's happening all the time? We can't just wait for a flood to happen or a building to burn down or an infection to, a disease to come out.
It goes back to what I said earlier. We need a strategic response. Yeah, we need a strategic approach, should I say. And it starts with actually gathering data of what we've done. As a community, we are so poor at gathering data. There's so much good practice, so much to inspire future generations, right? So we started that process. The MC Muslim Charities Forum have done that. There's the research done by Professor Jennifer Eggert. She did some research with us and with the Ramadan Tent Project to understand how we contributed to support the communities. Once you've done that, then what we need to do is we need to use that to learn from it and to design a better response going forward. And when we're talking about going forward, what you need is you need someone to coordinate. You need someone to coordinate, to bring everybody together. And organizations like Islamic Relief and National Zakat Foundation that have shown a very public commitment to work here in the UK. I think we can play a leading role with the likes of the Muslim Charities Forum as the umbrella organization that can bring everyone together. And through that platform, we can coordinate better. We can start to strategize, start to actually understand, research and survey and understand what are the real needs in the UK. At the moment, responding to the urgent needs of the pandemic, but there are a lot of long-term needs within our community. Youth disengagement. We hear about because of discrimination, young Muslims are not able to get on the job ladder. We have because we're a relatively new community, we are not as well as educated as other communities here in the UK, which as a result is leaving us sort of on the bottom lower rung of the poverty spectrum. 50% of our community lives in deprivation. It's a serious problem. So there are some real serious underlying issues within our community. We have communities that's feeling increasingly marginalized because of Islamophobia. These are all challenges that need to be addressed. We as organizations, especially the international NGOs, mashallah, we raise a lot of money. We raise a lot of money, and it is comforting to know that organizations like Islamic Relief and others are increasingly doing more work here. But it's not enough for me. We need to do a lot more. We've distributed, I think, just under £2 million in the last 2 years. Again, not enough. And we have a vision to do a lot more in the UK. We have a vision to actually play a much more strategic and much more pivotal role in the UK. So yeah, that's just I think some of the things that are needed. But it started now. It is a shame that it's taken a pandemic or Grenfell to understand the need for us to sort of coordinate better. But what I would say is that like for example, Islamic Relief, 2014 is when we first started to think about UK work, which is when we done our scoping exercise, which allowed us to create our strategy. So really, we are all quite new when it comes to the work of UK, domestic work. Even National Zakat Foundation, God bless them, they only started in 2010. So we're all really relatively new organization. And I think that, sorry? 2011, excuse me, sorry. Excuse me, 2011. Sorry. And so we are. I think there's a lot to be hopeful about too. I really do, because if you look, because of these very chaotic situations, it forced us to act in a certain way, and that means that there is a will, and that's something to build on. Inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. Iqbal, on that note, obviously you saw, firsthand the impact of Grenfell, the need to support, the need for zakat locally, charities coming together, and then there's been a bit of a lull, and now sadly on the back of the COVID, there's been another response from the community. It's been a response has been phenomenal from the Muslim community, without a doubt. Looking forward for because people might think, and charities might think for that matter, that the impact of COVID is now, injections out, it's fine, we're okay. What are the next few years looking like for the Muslim community?
Sure. Well, that's a broad question. So I'll narrow it to, in our context, at least in terms of the context of zakat distribution, I would say, proportionately, like when we started out the year, and this year was the first year where we have actually given Muslims who are giving zakat almost like a portfolio or allocation choice, right? In terms of the kind of impact default recommendation of 50% of your zakat will go towards hardship relief, 40% towards what is our housing and work fund, which is like an empowerment kind of fund, if you like. You have to go beyond the relief. And then there's an education fund, which is specifically about the training and development of being community leaders. Okay, so the focus this year, then, because of the pandemic, has been all in the hardship relief kind of space. Yeah, to the extent that we then also have changed our default recommendation in terms of the proportions. Currently, you go on the website, it's like 80-20-0. Yeah, meaning 80% hardship, 20% housing and work, like 0% education right now. Yeah, and to the extent that because of this situation, where we were discussing actually even this morning, just for a couple of months, just to make it 100-0-0, meaning like let people focus in that way. I think we will inevitably, and frankly, I want to move to a situation where we are where we're balancing more between the pure relief work, to the empowerment work in terms of the financial empowerment, as well as then the community empowerment work, which I think happens through, as we said, the training, development, and support for our leadership. So the kind of Tufail touched on some of the broader issues. So for example, some of the things that you can do through zakat then is to support our imams and religious leaders, right? In terms of a lot of our imams and religious leaders they're in poverty. A lot of them, let's be frank, a lot of them are literally eligible for the kind of hardship support that we provide, and we've seen that, by the way. We've seen imams of mosques have applied to us for support because they're in desperate need, because they're paid like £12,000 a year or something ridiculous, for a full-time job. So the point is that now who is investing in the kind of the development and the upskilling of this person, so that they can become even more of an example, even more of an inspiration, even more relevant and engaging to their own congregations and in the local community, right, that they serve, right, more generally, and when they represent Islam and Muslims in the public sphere. Similarly to those who are working across our Muslim organizations, like Muslim organizational infrastructure in this country, outside of just welfare work, including in welfare work, but outside of welfare work, is really underfunded. It's really underfunded. I just want to give one example. In the 2 years in 2018 and 2019, a good portion of our funds were 10-15% of our funds were spent, on a combination of this leadership development, but also then supporting organizations that are that we thought were in line or important to the future of Islam and Muslims in this country. So one of them was the Center for Media Monitoring, which is an MCB project, which launched almost 3 years ago now, whose role has been to, be a kind of watchdog, if you like, for the Muslim community with respect to how we are reported on, etc., etc. Now, that organization, mashallah, I think has done amazing work. I think it's had quite, substantial coverage. A lot of Muslims are aware of the kind of work that it's been doing and what it's achieved. Yeah, which positively affects all of us. In fact, anyone who engages with any form of media, right, to actually that what they read about Islam and Muslims is likely to be favorable, or is likely at least not to be harmful or unreasonable, let's say. Okay. Now, I know based on some recent conversations that project, literally in 3 months' time, its funding will run out. Yeah, its money will run out, basically. So like it's like a critical cornerstone type of project. Like any community facing the kinds of issues we're facing, you would have something like that, probably 10 times more funding, better funded than it even has been. But no, we're in a desperate kind of situation where, again, they're struggling to just get money from people to give, educational institutions, others, there's a whole, loads of examples you can go into. So I think that, in the medium to long term, that's why I say that it can't just take crises for us all to collaborate and come together. Because I think my observation is now, having been in this role for almost 10 years at NZF, is that like there is only so far that one organization can move the needle really in terms of like changing the mindset amongst the community if without the support of or without the kind of at least a moral kind of support or backing of those who are religious leaders, influencers, other organizations collecting huge amounts of money, whatever, who just need to come together on the common idea and the common cause, a very simple notion, that we just need to invest in developing the relevant infrastructure for our future as a community. And it goes beyond, like, we have to get beyond the primitive like mindset that we only give in the context of like when there's a disaster, then all of a sudden our sadaqah kind of mindset or a giving mindset comes into it. But why don't we see it as desperate and as important to invest in these other kinds of things, which are as critical, if not even more critical, to the way like Islam, to the how Islam will be basically in this country in decades down the road. I think that we've that sense of perspective. It just needs to be like, we need to be more than a handful of people that are giving that message. And inshallah, that's what I hope, to see. So in the near term, we hope that our balance of distribution will become more balanced outside of the relief space and into more empowering and supporting things. But more generally, it's going to take just a lot more, like Tufail has referenced, and I echo what has been said, that that more strategic approach to funding and support to address all of the issues that's been mentioned. Because if we don't do that, like I think the consequences of not doing that are really dire. Potentially. There's a verse in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, he says, spend in God's way and don't contribute to your destruction with your own hands. I found it's a powerful verse. Don't contribute to your destruction with your own hands. And the commentators say, well, meaning what? Meaning by not spending fi sabilillah. And spending fi sabilillah has the meaning of, in a broader sense, to support the kinds of things that make it easier for those who are on the straight path to carry themselves forward on that straight path, and making that straight path more open and accessible and inviting to those who are not on it. It's as if most of our discussions when it comes to giving are almost in a very small corner of, almost in the wrong frame almost. We only talk in the context of material poverty, and that's all we ever talk about when it comes to giving. As if material poverty was our number one priority to solve as believers. But it's not. It's a very important part, but it's part of a bigger picture. We're supposed to be solving people's spiritual poverty. And that takes money too, by the way. Even the Prophet ﷺ needed money to go and do that. So it's important that our perspective, inshallah, changes, and hopefully we'll move to a better...
Sure. Well, look, on that note, bring Tufail in nicely. Tufail, obviously... it's a conscious decision, 6-7 years ago from Islamic Relief to start looking at work in the UK, mashallah. And obviously, at the beginning of the pandemic, took a conscious decision to release £500,000 worth of zakat to be given within the UK. What advice would you give, or, what process should charities and organizations start to think about now, given that we're in this pandemic, we're at the peak of it, we've seen the impact, and it's highlighted a lot of underlying issues that have been happening in the Muslim community for years. and now suddenly we've come, we need to do something about them. What advice would you give to people that are watching from a charity or an organization, or have got a connection, who have got the power to make change? What should their thought process be? How would you help someone to try to strategize what's the way forward?
I think first of all is to understand that there is a need here, and that will hopefully open up a whole sort of spectrum of possibilities for them. I think it's important that we are a very Jazbati community. We're a very emotional community, right? And we like to basically get in there without. I'm really generalizing. I get shot down here, but we really like to sort of jump in right into the fray and sort of like do whatever we can to support people in need. It's a beautiful. It's actually on one level it's very beautiful because it shows, mashallah, the sincerity of the community, the compassion of the community. But it sometimes we do need to step back and actually try to understand what is the actual problem, what is the actual root cause of the problem. And what I would say to organizations is that don't reinvent the wheel just yet. Right? There is some work has been done here by the National Zakat Foundation, by Islamic Relief. Reach out to us. We did our scoping exercise in 2014. The National Zakat Foundation have done extensive strategic work. They've got their zakat policy, for example, and both of these pieces of work have identified a need within the UK. More is needed, though. I don't think it's especially from our perspective. We're now about to embark on another strategic piece to really understand what the cause is. So I would recommend that charities actually reach out to us and try and understand. And we're open. We're an open organization, as is NZF. Happy to share because we're beneficiary-led organizations. For us, the most important thing is to eradicate what is the issue that is causing people grief, harm, difficulty. So approach us, ask us to share information. Happy to do that. Then inshallah, hopefully, you have the Muslim Charities Forum. Speak to the Muslim Charities Forum. Get involved with the conversations that are now starting to happen to bring organizations together to discuss this issue. The Muslim Charities Forum is now signed a partnership with the National Emergency Trust. This is the organization to be set up to respond to emergencies here in the UK. MCF is now one of its partners with the VCSEP, the Voluntary Sector Community Emergency Partnership. So that is an organization that is set up to basically coordinate emergency efforts across the country. MCF is a part of that and is now the Muslim organization that's coordinating on behalf of the community. So there is now a platform there that organizations can get involved in to help us coordinate better. So, but really, we're right at the beginning. We're right at the beginning, I hope that inshallah, through a platform like the Muslim Charities Forum, we can start that dialogue and start to better coordinate and work more strategically, inshallah. But it starts with understanding what the problem is, and for that, you already have a couple of organizations that have already started some work there. Reach out to us. Happy to share information. That will help you to get started. Even better, partner with organizations like the National Zakat Foundation. There are other partners in the community actually that are doing very good work too. We partner with, for example, FareShare, Sufra, food banks, the Muslim Scouts Fellowship, for example. A lot of organizations that we are partnering. So there are lots of civil society organizations that are doing great work here. There is a network that's there, a network that we're tapped into, and we're happy to open up other organizations too.
Sure. Jazakallah khair for that, Tufail. Iqbal, final words from yourself?
Final word. Just as we've been talking, something occurred to me which hasn't occurred to me for a while, which is one of the, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, when he became the Khalifa, he gave a very famous kind of opening speech, very short, sharp, and powerful speech. And one of the things he said in that speech is that he said, the weak amongst you will be considered strong by me until you are given what is rightfully yours. And the strong amongst you will be considered weak by me until what you have that is owed to others that you've given. And so it's an amazing, beautiful perspective, right? And it's an inspirational one for us, and it just reminds us, really, of it's just the importance of making sure that that kind of the rebalancing effect that zakat and giving is supposed to have between the haves and the have-nots, like it just has to happen. It has to happen. And for me personally, obviously in the role that I'm in, I take inspiration from that, And I'm not, and I suppose I'm not shy, therefore, to kind of come to Muslims in this country and say, listen, this is the situation. There are the weak amongst us, and we should all consider them to be strong. Meaning that the phrase in Arabic is basically to say, look, that you kind of you sort of give voice to their rights, basically, and that's what it is. When you're in a situation where you are eligible to receive zakat, it's your right, and we will give voice to their rights until their rights are restored. Once their rights are restored, that's fine, then the situation is the situation is balanced, and that's fine. But when we are in this situation where you have people coming, which, as I said, in terms of that balance hasn't happened before, but people are coming to the level that we are not coming forward and supporting as a community when we can, and we should then that's something which we're going to make a noise about. And so I encourage all of you to kind of participate in that, not just by giving yourself, just give, but sharing with others. And let's meet, inshallah, our target, because there's still £250,000 left, in terms of what we can project and we understand. And we don't want, even for £1 really to be short of that, so that, by February, March, we're not in a situation where we are having to tell people to wait for support. So that's all. And just to thank again Tufail and Islamic Relief for their support, and thank you, Naeem, as well, for hosting us ably.
Jazakallah khairan. So just a reminder to finish off with, first of all, Jazakallah khair Tufail, the UK Director for Islamic Relief, and Iqbal, CEO at NZF. Tonight's webinar was about bridging the gap, the £500,000, £500,000 worth of zakat that is required to fulfill the applications that are coming through to NZF. And alhamdulillah, Islamic Relief UK have given a donation of 200,000 plus to support that gap. Money is being raised at the moment, and you can go online to nzf.org.uk/zakat is running out to pay zakat if you haven't done so, or give a little bit more, or tell people that haven't done so. And secondly, if you want to apply for zakat, if you are in need, you can go online to nzf.org.uk/apply. And if you want to support Islamic Relief in their cause and doing exactly the same thing, you can go to islamic-relief.org.uk. From myself, until next time, inshallah, Jazakumullah khair, Tufail, Iqbal, and everybody watching. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam.